attack some of the fundamental academic priorities that the school should have. So I've actually developed an academic sort of platform that I call my 3E platform, and it's engaged, involved, engaged, enriched, and evolving. And so the general idea is that I want to specifically target a number of very strategic areas where I feel that students can make the greatest difference in the actual information, content, and delivery methods that we receive information at school. From my perspective, I'm a passionate academic, and I very much feel that we come to university to learn, and my main priority is actually trying to improve and generally enrich the way we learn here at school, because in my mind that is the single greatest priority that we have here as students.
Hi everyone, I'm Sabrina. I'm running for VP Student Life. I'm also right now the VP External for CASA Cares, the John Wilson charity wing. So our main platform points for student life, first off would be to promote pride and culture at Concordia. I think it'd be really cool to have a new clothing line to promote Concordia across the campus. Otherwise, to also have cultural nights across both campuses and to promote more the athletics, the swarm. Otherwise, I want to create more inter-faculty events, working with the strengths and weaknesses in all different faculties, have monthly meetings with the executives of all the different faculties, and to be able to utilize Reggies and Hive spaces better for students. And also, lastly, to communicate better with students, maybe perhaps have a new app, have a better website. So that's for student life.
Hi guys, my name's Scott. As much as I'd love to talk to you about financial overhaul, probably none of you will really care that much. So I'm going to jump into something completely different and talk to you about communication. 12% of students can associate the CSU logo with anything. They have no idea what it is. 17% have no idea what the CSU is at all. 75% of students say they feel like they just have no clue what the CSU does. That's problematic. Most students pay almost $400 throughout their academic careers into the CSU, and they don't even know the services that are provided to them. Our platform is we want to communicate to the regular student. We want to make sure they know what's available to them. Our three main platform points across that is we want information to be relevant, we want it to be beneficial, and we want it to be visible across multiple platforms. We want a working website. That would be a great start. So very simply, we want to communicate.
Thanks, Scott. So once again, my name is Melissa. I am a managing student. I'm actually the president of CASA Cares, the charity wing at JMSB with Sabrina. And I'm going to go over the last platform point for you guys, which is student space. We kind of call it creating your community for three reasons. First, we want to advocate for more student space. The library is just about to go under renovation, and we think it's really important that students have more space for studying times. We want to open up classrooms, so that students aren't kind of stuck looking around frantically for a place to study. Second, we want to rediscover student space. There are so many fantastic places here in the university. We want to make sure that they are used to their absolute best. And finally, we want to give students a choice. We want to hear what it is that you guys want in your university. So let's talk. Thank you, guys.
All right. You guys ready?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hey everyone, my name is Ben Prenti. I am the current Vice President of Sustainability for the Union, and my background is in the School of Community and Public Affairs as well as Liberal Arts College. To my left here is Heather Nagy, and she has a background in sociology rather, and she has 2 years as a financial coordinator for the largest campus-wide Feel Living group, which is the People's Potato. And then we have Terry Wilkins, who is she's our finance person rather. We have Terry Wilkins, who's our VP Academic and Advocacy, and he currently works at the Advocacy Center and is a student senator. And then we have Anthony Garfalis Auger, who is double majoring in the School of Community and Public Affairs as well as poli-sci. So I guess I'll start. So as the president, I would be prioritizing communication. I'm sure that doesn't come as any surprise. Our three major platform points, I'll go over one at a time. They kind of bleed into each other in a nice way. So the first one is, it has to do with connecting Concordia communities, and I think that this is by connecting Concordia communities, it's a really pervasive way to kind of address a lot of the major issues like participation and relevance. And so from my perspective, the CSU just isn't as relevant as it could be, and it's not targeting the organizations that it needs to be targeting to reach out to students more. So we would like to essentially focus on groups, so that by focusing on groups, those groups will then work with individuals, and that's how we'll reach the individuals on the membership level. So essentially, these groups are leadership that need to be tapped into more. Clubs under Fine Arts and the Engineering Society being two main areas where we could reach out. We have notoriously leftover money in the club's budget line every year, and yet there are clubs under Fine Arts and there are clubs in engineering that are not really making use of this as much as they could. I think that this is a policy problem that we need to overcome, and it's one of the things I would like to do first, so that throughout the year they can be taking advantage of this money that is there for them to use. It's the club budget line, it should be going into clubs. The next one, okay, and then a way that we can do this also with food, which bleeds into the sustainable student food policy, is by creating an incentive structure for organizations on campus, tapping into the existing leadership, by allowing groups to apply for funding through the SPACE budget line, the student SPACE account, which is in the millions. It's very large. It's currently not being used, and there is research that shows that students do want student-run food options on campus, and they specifically want healthy options as well. It's very lacking, and so by providing an incentive structure in a way for students to, or student groups rather, to apply for funding, they know it's there. It's a very strong incentive. There is no other incentive structure like this on campus, where students can literally get the funding they need to start a food provider. But I don't have enough time. I couldn't talk in great detail about the food policy to no end really, but we want to focus on the Java U. We want to focus on the Hive, and we have ideas for a greenhouse as well. Essentially we want to build an alternative student food structure to challenge Chartwell's, inject competition back into the food market because really it doesn't exist right now and hasn't existed for a while. And just provide an alternative to the meal plan for students that are currently forced essentially onto the meal plan if they want to live on residence. But I'll pass it over here for the financial policy.
Hi everybody, my name's Heather. I'm running for VP Finance. Super quick. Everybody's talking in finances about transparency, accountability, and accessibility. That's exactly what we want to do as a team. As Ben brought up, a lot of clubs and even individuals don't know about the grant money that's available to them from the CSU. So I want to make a one-page, easy-to-read document that you can find on the website at any time. Go there, you can see as an individual, as a group of students with a group that hasn't yet been ratified, or as a group of students that's part of a club or a society, how you can get funding. Put the finances online, have some public financial updates that any membership or anybody can come and see, like on a semesterly basis. And the Newtown report had some really great things about making sure there's a signing officer on the council too. That's it. Thanks. Okay.
Chuck? We've got 3 minutes.
Okay, first of all, sorry if I cough a lot because I'm sick. Campaigning takes a lot out of you. Am I ready to go?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, cool. So I'm Chuck. I'm running as an independent candidate for president. And if you combine the 3 affiliation names, you actually get a united community experience. And that's what I want to bring you. So one of the big problems we've seen in the last year is this sort of division between sort of political factions or groups on campus. And I want to be able to bring those groups back together. I think it's really sucky that there is this large divide between student groups, and I've had a lot of experience, especially in this past year, sort of bridging the gap between multiple constituencies, and I'd like to really take that to the CSU so that we actually feel like an entire community. We talk about community a lot, but are we disaffecting large portions of our membership at the same time? So just something to keep in mind. One of my major platform points is changing the sort of role that the CSU plays in the community. And that's shifting it from a body that sort of straddles the line between academic and social advocacy and put it more towards academic advocacy. And the reason for that is the CSU holds a unique position as an accredited student organization, and the fee levies hold a unique position as being specific to social advocacy. So I think it makes the most sense in terms of the entire community to actually focus our efforts and work collaboratively so that the fee levy get the people and the tools that they need from the CSU, and the CSU is then concentrating on academic stuff. I don't have much time, so I'm sort of zipping through things. Major thing, data. So we should use more data in the way we make decisions, and that's things like actually statistically validated surveys, rather than referendums, which are sort of participatory reliant. And so we want to actually gauge what the student membership feels so that we make the right decisions for them. We can also use data internally a lot, like keeping track of the cases that are handled by Advocacy and the Legal Information Clinic. Those are 2 services that are run by the CSU. Student space. So I want to work collaboratively with the faculty associations to really make a comprehensive needs assessment on what everyone needs. There's different needs in every faculty, and we should be bringing that forward as a collective rather than sort of in a fragmented manner. We should also be improving our current student space, and that's things like painting that shitty tunnel that goes from the hall building over to the EVMB building. Like, that's dank and concrete and could be beautiful. Comms, everyone's talked about it. I'm going to say it too. The website, I actually made the committee that's reforming the website. Our tender's going out soon. And useful info, it's not just about giving them information, it's about providing it in a way that is relevant to students. If you give them an entire budget, they're not necessarily going to understand. It's not really digestible. Showcasing and encouraging student work, that's a big point. The university is moving in that direction, and I would like to work with them to meet that end. And empowering council. So that's a like indirect sort of benefit to students, but it's giving the student leaders a chance to really affect change in their union. And I think if we did that, hopefully someone will be asking me a question about this so I can explain it more. I think that would be incredibly beneficial to students. Thanks.
Okay, CS United. You guys ready? You're ready. Go.
Okay, I just want to say why exactly we're here, because we've been getting a lot of questions about that. And we're here because we're students that represent a very wide population here at Concordia. We are very diverse academically, culturally, in terms of sexual orientation and everything else. We have members from many different organizations around campus, such as the Concordia Canadian Asian Society, the Dragon Boat Team, Residents, ASEC, Aboriginal Art Research Group, GMSB Case, Queer Concordia, Engineers Without Borders, and many others. And what we're trying to do is, after speaking with a few organizations, is that we want to give resources, or we want to make the resources here at Concordia more available for students, because they feel as though that even though there are resources, they don't always know about them until much later on when someone else brings it up. We want to give students the tools to achieve great things here, because everyone here, I guess, at one point in their life said, I'm going to do something great in my student career or while I'm here at university. But you never know what's available or where to go to find out those resources. And what we want to do is bring those tools and resources to the students and show them that what they can achieve. Okay. Ways we can do that is, sorry, I'm a little nervous right now. It's my first time debating and being in front of a crowd. What we want to do is build a sense of unity here at Concordia, because as you can see, that there's a common theme that we're all discussing here, and it's a lack of unity, a lack of community here, and we want to bring all organizations together. I'm going to pass it along to my other teammates here so that they could speak about what they want to achieve as well. I'm going to pass it over to Simon here, who is the VP Clubs.
Hello, everyone. My name is Simon Datzer. I'm running for VP Clubs. And yes, we are very much axed on creating and empowering students to make the most out of their community, to their university experience. And as VP Clubs, I have a lot of ideas on how we can improve that. When students come, one of the big obstacles to joining clubs is actually going out to talk to them. It can be very daunting for first-year students or second-year, third-year students to actually make that jump. So I would like to open up a pilot program for clubs, wherein students would be encouraged to go visit clubs and club activities, and they would receive points on a specific card that would tally up, and they would get a reward at the end of the year, where they would get a ticket to an end of year party. This would effectively, kind of give them an incentive to go out there, and kind of give them actually an excuse to go out to meet a lot of clubs that they wouldn't otherwise have gone to see. I'll pass it over to Matt Garrett.
Hi everybody, I'm Matsu Gertin and I'm running for VP External. We do understand that the CSU has a lot of internal resources, but there are a lot of external resources like the fee levy groups that we want to make sure that their visibility and their benefit to the community is brought forward for everyone at Concordia, no matter what faculty, student, or association.
Okay, that ends our sort of introductory time. What we're going to move into now is questions from the public. By public, again, I just want to stress that if you're a CSU counselor, an executive, a senate, or a candidate, please refrain until everybody else has the opportunity to ask their questions. With that in mind, you're welcome to put up your hand if there's anything you'd like cleared up by the candidates. Go ahead.
Do I have a mic or?
Nope, you just direct it towards me, I reiterate it.
Hello. Hi everyone. My name is Sandro, president of the John Molson Sustainable Business Group, and this question is to Community Matters.
I'm afraid that's not really how it works.
Okay, so
you have to direct questions to everybody at the front because it's a debate, so you can't ask pointed questions to a team.
Okay, perfect. So, I'm going to ask this with the three teams.
And Chuck.
So, transparency, accountability, VP Finance, it's your role. That's great. As a president, those criteria with someone who has financial education from a world-renowned school like JMSB is. So I'm asking, how will it affect the quality of your report should you not be a finance minor or major as a student? And I'm not targeting it.
Okay, so the question is, how will it affect your ability to do your job if you do not have a finance minor or major?
Yeah, educational background.
Okay, so we're gonna let experienced CSU field that question first.
Yeah, I have a finance background. Cool. Beyond that, I do want to allude to certain things. I came in the first time in 8 years. There hasn't been a finance major in the finance position in 8 years. No surprise, our taxes weren't paid. Not so cool. $107,000 worth. We talk about this whole aspect of transparency and accountability. Our systems are barely even running right now. When we walked into office this year, because I'm the current VP Finance, sorry, forgot to mention that, everything was everywhere. We weren't using inventory control, we weren't using any basic accounting work. And it was really blatantly obvious that there wasn't someone who had understood what it is required to actually be in the financial office. It's very frustrating, but at the end of the day, we managed to start building. Funny enough, transparency, it's something everyone's throwing around. I kind of gonna just throw this out. We really do want to be transparent, and there's no better way that we believed, and it's been something that I've been working on for about a week and a half now. We're actually gonna be releasing our full-fledged budget tomorrow morning for next year that you guys can evaluate and ask questions on to the complete public student population. So we talk about transparency. Realistically, there's very limited ways we're actually going to be able to be transparent before we even get our systems up and running. We have to completely rehaul our financial system, change all our funds and the way we actually account for our funds through restricted fund accounting. And there's still a lot of work to be done. I don't even know if our website could support financial documents right now. It may crash. So yeah, I mean, I agree with financial transparency and accountability and all this stuff. We've been putting in controls all year. But really the focus here, to me, is we want to be, to a certain extent, transparent, but at the same time, there's a lot of work to do before we can even hit that stage. Thank you.
Okay, Community Matters.
Okay, I'm just going to open really quickly. On the note of financial transparency, the reason that we launched our budget online on day one, our campaign budget, was because we are in fact involved in a campaign right now and we're not currently operating the CSU, so we thought that the most important thing was to explain our finances that we're currently using to show an example of what we're going to be doing in the future and how open we intend on being with all of our financial transactions. So if you take a look at our website, you'll find our cards are on there, you'll find that our chalk is on there, and that we launched this on day one on purpose, very, very deliberately. But I'm going to pass it off to my finance person to continue.
Hi everybody. So I just want to say that, I mean, I know that it wasn't directed at me, but I sort of felt like maybe it was. So I'll start just by saying, like, we just did an interview with the Concordian, and I put that my weakness is my self-deprecating honesty in participating in these types of political avenues. So I'll just say that I honestly do not have a finance minor or major. I've taken some courses at the John Wilson School of Business in accounting, and I also did electives in calculus classes because I'm more of a math brain. All the finance knowledge that I have, I learned from being a collective member at the People's Potato. When I got in there as a financial coordinator in 2009, I got full training from the people that were going out. I was able to learn the accounting systems of both the outgoing accounting software system, which was QuickBooks, and the incoming, which is simply accounting. We were able to recreate the financial committee completely and delineate like new rules of continuity for our employees so that we have more financial knowledge. We wrote a best practices how-to 25-page guide with an annual annex of everything that we did every month. We also got all of our taxes back up and paid on time, so much so that the government only demands remittance payroll taxes from us every 3 months as opposed to every month, which is normal for nonprofits that have had a completely great record for a year. Anyways, if you want to know more about that, you can ask me and I will tell you. Okay.
Chuck.
Pass me the mic. Thank you. So the teams and Chuck. Sort of addressing what you said. I mean, obviously I'm a president and not a VP Finance, but I'm going to address it from my point of view as well. Sure, it might be important to have a specific education, but there's also a lot of practical knowledge that comes from wanting to learn these things. And at least from my experience, I was the VP Finance for the ECA last year. We've managed to completely overhaul the way we did our finances, including having policies that were sane. And Scott talked about the financial reform this year. I worked solidly with him. That whole fund accounting thing is actually I've made a major push for that. So I mean, when it comes down to it, it's more about your ability to want to learn what is good for finances in an organization. And policies obviously play a big role in that because the way things are from the perspective of the student is this sort of notion of transparency, right? And that's not when it comes down to it, is that a real platform point? Well, it's sort of the base of an actual platform because everyone wants transparency. Not a single person is going to say, I don't want transparency, right? From my perspective, like I said sort of during my intro, it's about making that information relevant. So it's not just about being transparent, it's about being useful for your members in terms of what you're spending as an organization.
Thank you. Guys ready?
Yes, I'll be answering the question. Our VP Finance is not actually with us today, but the question might as well have been directed at us as well, because our VP Finance is not in a background of finance. It's English literature, but she has been involved as the VP Finance for Queer Concordia for the past 2 years, and she helped make it much more accountable. Like Chuck said, it's very nice to have that sort of formal education in it, but at a certain point it starts to get where it's more important to have a practical knowledge of it and a practical understanding of how finance works. That's my statement.
Okay. Open up to questions from the public, not candidates. Go ahead.
My question is about the implementation of a student-run cafe and what's currently the Java U on the mezzanine. As a student and someone who's concerned with sustainable food systems and food sovereignty in general, I feel as though the follow-through of this initiative is incredibly important for the Concordia community and beyond. Ethical food choices set a precedent for responsible business, better agriculture, and environmental practices. A referendum held during the academic year revealed that students had voted 87% in favor of having this initiative put in practice. My concern is that not all of the teams here will be working to respect this referendum, and I want to know what candidates will be doing next year to make sure to follow through with and that students' voices are actually heard.
Okay, so the question is, what are teams planning on doing to implement a co-op cafe?
Can we start other side and start switching it up?
Sure.
Thank you.
You guys ready?
Sure.
Go ahead.
We very much welcome any student initiative, especially one where it empowers students to make their own cafe. I know that the CFC, the Concordia Food Coalition, has been working very hard and the CSU has been mandated even by the student population for this to happen. So we would very much, CS United would very much like to see that happen, and we encourage any student initiative, and we would welcome a cafe in the Mez.
Alright, so actually since I started at Concordia, I've been wondering why that space is not operated by a student-run something. Because if it's beneficial to have a Reggie's, right, a bar that's operated by students, why is it not beneficial to have a cafe operated by students? I don't really want to get into too much of the politics behind this whole issue. That was sort of like a politically loaded question. But I will say that it was a binding referendum question, which means that the CSU has to do it, like sort of end statement. So, I mean, no matter what happens, we should obviously be working towards something that is good for students. And I'm pretty sure all students feel that having a cheaper cafe there would be very beneficial for everyone. I certainly would eat there all the time. And so this sort of like ties back into actually surveying the membership to find out what is really important to them. And certainly this food cafe is. But we should be offering possible options, right? Rather than a yes-no. Because personally, I don't really like a yes-no dichotomy. I like to be able to see what's actually possible. Certainly a co-op is one of those options. I'm just sort of rambling by this point. But all this to try to say, right, like, I will work towards it. I will do what I am mandated to do as a president. And I would assume that all of council and all of the executive would as well, because that's their job.
Thanks, Chuck. Community Matters?
Hey, great question. So this year I've been working on this pretty much nonstop. 3 members on our team are actually co-founders of the Food Coalition, so it's undeniable that we have a background specifically in food security as well as food sovereignty and improving the quality of food on campus in general. I mean, I raised just under $70,000 for this project in particular at the Hive, actually, at Loyola, and so I would share this knowledge with my VPs that would continue to work specifically where I left off. And actually, it's actually reassuring that the 2 VPs with me were involved in a lot of this process already. So Jessica Cabana in particular was already working towards the Hive, or rather the JavaU space, whatever it will be called in the future, and she's actually managed to allocate work with ASPA to allocate $14,000 there, specifically for this project, and that was done through volunteer labor. I think that there's a lot of possibility in a shared governance structure with the Hive. We have a really strong board that's developing there. Lawyers already agreed to sit on it for free. We have a prof who has a background specifically in sustainable food who also has agreed to sit on the board. And we've got numerous very enthusiastic students who would also like to participate and have been actively participating as well. Yeah, actually, specifically the co-op model I think is really important for this because whereas right now the CSU is kind of like you have to go through the CSU in order to participate in QSecor. But if you have the co-op model, then you can kind of bring together all the students that have a specific interest in food, and that's all that they work on is food-related issues on campus. But I think, would you like to add a little bit to it?
Yeah, I just want to say that, like, I personally, as a student, have always been super excited about food security and sovereignty on campus. That's why I started out at People's Potato. That's why I now work at Frigo Vert, and I'm hoping that my practical understanding of specifically budgets and how to start up these student-run cafes. Everybody knows that cafes and restaurants are a bit of a money sucker, so you really have to know what you're doing. And that's all I have to say, because I'm cut off again. Okay, get used to it.
Spirit CSU, you guys ready? Go.
So the first thing I want to do is clear up a misconception. I know to a certain extent this question is targeted at me. And the number one thing I want to let you guys know is that it's not that I don't want a student-run cafe. By all means. Actually, fun fact, before I even got to the CSU, I modeled an entire grocery store's financials behind a cooperative model that scaled based on how much money you were making in the real world and then gave back to people who didn't make as much money and killed all margins for the grocery store. So the reality is I love these cool ideas. The difference is that when this referendum question was asked, which cool referendum question by all means, there were no numbers that we're taking a look at. Funny enough, I'm the one that's actually building the financial model for this cafe. I'm the one that's actually looking at how we can actually make this financially feasible. How can this actually work? So yeah, to say that we fully support the fact that, yes, we've been mandated to put in a cafe there. We respect that mandate. We respect it to the point where I'm the one building all the financials for it, even after we didn't even know what the final outcome would be for the numbers. Would it make money? Would it lose money? We don't know, but we're gonna make it work whether we want to or not. I personally actually am a huge supporter of student-run activities. I think that this is a great initiative. What I would have loved to see is a financial breakdown before the students got to decide. Because to me, to be accountable, and everyone talks about accountability, we should know what we're voting on. So that's kind of the ending point to it. But we're gonna make it happen and we're gonna make it work. So, thank you.
Okay. Questions from the public?
Yeah, it's not really questions but in Loyola campus, everybody talk about the hive that if I don't understand, it's not open yet. And why don't you try to help the student-run coffee that is already open for years, the G-Lounge, to run better and to give fun? I'm part of it, and I know that we're trying to be more sustainable in everything we do. And we asked for fun, and we didn't kind of have any answer. And that's why I want to know what you can do for already student-run coffee like that.
Okay. So the question is, what is your plans in order to aid and assist currently running student-run cafes on campus? We're going to start at this end.
Funny enough, all these questions are business model questions. Fun times. I actually minor in entrepreneurship as well, so I studied business models. Cool stuff. I think that reviewing how you actually operate and the services that you offer is really just overviewing your business model and seeing how we can make it better. I mean, personally, I have a lot of experience in business models. I would love to sit down with you and see how you can make it better. The Hive is something that we've kind of been mandated to do, and that Loyola students have made it clear that they want a Hive cafe. Do I think 2 cafes can be operating at Loyola? Absolutely. It's kind of a food desert. So, truthfully, I'd love to sit down with you and take a look at what other services can be offered. How can we maximize your resources? How can we make it a better cafe? Cool? Cool. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so last year I actually sat down with one of the managers of the G Lounge for about an hour and a half. It was an impromptu kind of interview. We tried to figure out ways that we would be able to work together. It seemed as though sustainability concerns were actually one of the concerns of the G Lounge. So we talked about ways to help get a dishwasher in there maybe so that they wouldn't have to have disposable items as much. I think I like the word co-opetition, which means that So I'm a big fan of the word co-opetition as opposed to competition, and so I think co-opetition between groups that could be in competition with one another, like the Hive Cafe and the G Lounge, instead they could work together with cross-promotional help and things like that to kind of emphasize the student-run nature of them, so that I think that it's really important to build kind of a pride on student-run organizations on campus, and I think the G Lounge is an ally in that. Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential for help there. Specifically, the Food Coalition as well. I think would be a really great group to reach out to. I know that their attitude is very similar to what I'm expressing right now. But yeah, is there anybody else that would like to?
Just add a really quick point. So I'm running for VP External of the organization, and for sustainability, the government is actually trying to pass a food sovereignty policy, or it has passed, but they're passing legislation, and they're trying to get 50% of the food in public institutions to be locally produced in Quebec. So they're going to be implementing this over the next year. It's up in the air whether or not Concordia is going to be covered by this because it's a para-public institution. But we'd like to work on that particular portfolio to be able to get as much local food as possible so that the sustainability of all cafes, so that all cafes have sustainable food offered to Concordia students.
Thank you.
I actually really like that word co-opetition. I think it's pretty funny. So the G Lounge, man, thank God for the G Lounge, right? Like, oh, if it wasn't there, fuck.
Guys?
Sorry, decorum, right? So, sort of like to what Ben was saying about co-opetition, right? Like, it's about sharing resources so that every institution wins in the end. And with the CSU's massive amounts of resources, I think the onus is on them to make those links in reaching out to all the different organizations on campus to ensure that they have the tools they need to actually fulfill their mandate. And the G Lounge is definitely one of those. And promotion of the space itself is something that is sort of integral to its successful operation. So one of the platform points that I have is a student space map. So right now there's actually no sort of unified resource to be able to tell what spaces exist on campus. And a resource like that would be very useful. At least from my experiences with the Hive and the G Lounge, they both have a different sort of vibe to them. And they're sort of different places, right? And a space map that describes those sorts of vibes, if you will, allows them to work together. Students know that both exist and that both are slightly different, and they can choose their own, right, as they see fit. Different strokes for different folks. So that's sort of how I see the situation. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Chuck.
You're welcome. Okay, so I was actually the manager of the G Lounge last year, and I was an employee there before. So I've been working at the G Lounge for the past 2 years up until April 2013. And so what exactly I want to do with the G Lounge is I want to give it the resources to make it better, to make it more visible to students. Because there's a lot of students that come to the G Lounge looking for a place to study and a place to eat or hang out with friends. But the main problem that I found was there weren't enough places to sit down and eat. So I'd be looking into getting more chairs and tables for students there. Because I don't know if you've been to the G Lounge, but it's a very, very large room. And there are maybe 15 to 20 actual tables, and there's a lot more room for other tables to be added in. So we'd be looking into just creating more space for students. And in terms of the Hive, we'd be looking into creating a business model for both of them so that it would target different audiences and that we could bring more people together in the Concordia community. Because like Chuck said, that the Hive and the G Lounge both have very different vibes, and depending on what kind of person you are and what kind of environment you like to be in, you'd have to pick between one and the other. So this is what we work to creating. We'd be differentiating the two kind of atmospheres and environments so that students have more options as to where to go, whether they want to go to some place with lots of people where they're all studying and having fun, or a more quieter environment where they could just relax and eat and just read quietly in peace.
Thank you. More questions from the general public. Let's go from the back, all the way at the back.
I was wondering, considering the difficulty of purchasing a building in downtown Montreal, the costs that come with that, all these kinds of things, do the teams and the candidates have any particular plans for the student space fund in the absence of the option to buy building? Just curious to know how that money would be spent if it's not specifically to buy a physical location at the center.
Okay, with the scarcity of real estate to buy buildings for a student center, do you have an alternative in terms of the allocation of those funds? We're starting at this end.
Can you repeat the question, please?
No.
Sorry. No?
Can you repeat the question?
With the student center fund, if you can't buy a building, what would you do with it?
Okay. So if there weren't any real estate downtown where we could buy a building for Concordia, we would look into either renovating spaces or building on top. I was told that the library building actually was built on top, and so we just keep doing that onto other buildings. That's one option that we could look into. Or we could look into maybe renting out different areas in buildings, empty spaces, because actually I'm freezing up here.
Other options we could use is renovating space to make better use of them so that they become more optimal. Or we could perhaps look into leasing space long term in order for temporary club space or activity space or whatever is needed. And then thirdly, there's also doesn't even go into the money, but there's a lot of space that is currently not being used to its optimal, advantage, or is forgotten. So we could definitely look into trying to use the existing space optimally before we even start thinking of purchasing more buildings or renovating or doing what is necessary.
Okay, so first, just as sort of a pretext, I'm going to explain something which is kind of complicated, because this question is frustratingly complex, because there's actually two different funds. There is the first fund that was established, which was the Student Union Building Fund, and then in 2011 it was changed to the Student Space Accessible Education and Legal Contingency Fund, or SAILC. So SUB and SAILC now coexist together. The Student Space Fund can be used for anything student space related, whereas the strictly building fund, when it was collected, was supposed to be used only for the purchase of a building. So now we're sort of in this awkward situation of this money that just sort of sits there, and another one that we can sort of wiggle around with. The other thing that I want to mention is that in all of the student surveys that we've done over the past few years, a student union building is still actually a priority in students' minds. And that's been found through data. The whole leasing a building thing is something that has come up in discussions before. I think the first person I heard it from was actually Scott. That's sort of a reasonable idea. If you have an endowment, if you're using the Student Union Building Fund as an endowment, it'll generate you money, and then you don't have to touch it, which means that you would not be sort of like breaking the rules of how you collected it. So it's like there's all these layers of annoyance to this question because there's no simple answer to it. If I were to propose any solution, it would probably be making a new fund, a third fund, that would actually be what students want it to be. And that's the way that I see this whole thing moving forward.
Thanks, Chuck. Community Matters.
Great question. Okay, so yeah, what Chuck said, it's a really complicated fund. That's absolutely true. There is definitely some ambiguity in the bylaws. It's quite open-ended. The wording is kind of all over the place. We actually posted something called Demystifying the Student Union Fund on our website. But aside from the incentives for food services, well, actually, I'll go over that a little bit. So research was done that showed that students do want student-run food services, as I had said earlier. And so our logic is kind of, when it comes to student-run food services, we already have a student center, and it's called Concordia University. There are a lot of opportunities therein to expand. But that's not really meant to take up a lot of our time. The incentive structure that we have, that's meant to just allow other leadership groups to kind of to take advantage of the incentives, basically. On the note of the building, so students have already been consulted twice, and they rejected more or less buying the Faubourg building or large portions of it. But its space is obviously a really important issue, so this is going to be something that I personally would work on quite a bit. I anticipate conversations with the university. They have a rather large penchant for real estate, and I think that this presents us with a really great opportunity to leverage the university for help with other interesting projects, like a greenhouse potentially at Loyola campus, because the research has already been done, and actually the SC building, coincidentally student center building, is actually fortified to hold a greenhouse on the roof, and I think that allows for some pretty interesting developments in terms of food sovereignty and stuff like that. And it could really put Concordia on the map for standing out, because greenhouses on roofs for food production is really something that's up and coming. I mean, you've got them in New York, you've got Loofah Farms here. I anticipate conversations with the university on this, I'm not gonna lie.
Okay, thanks. Experience CSU.
Thanks. So honestly, I think the candidates they've covered a lot about the fund itself. It's a huge question that's come up in these elections, and obviously student space is something really, really important this year, not only because of the library renovations coming up, but just the sheer lack of student space for us to actually be able to study and to socialize in, to hang out in. So we actually have been sitting down and discussing possible solutions to this. So of course I'm kind of going to pass the mic over to Scott again because it's financially related. So he's going to go over a few of our ideas.
Okay, so I have an Excel sheet. Fun stuff. So actually our fund, we've been in talks basically with a couple organizations to put our money into SRIs, which is socially responsible investments. We're looking at generating approximately $600,000 on average per year with a $10 million fund. If this fund continues to grow at the rate that it does, in the next probably about 5 years, we'll have 20 million, which will generate $1.2 million of interest. I would not suggest the CSU buy real estate. That doesn't make sense. We can't operate real estate realistically. This is why this is why I've always suggested, and I've gone up against past CSU presidents, past people within who have always pushed for a student center building. We can lease floors on a student center building based off that $20 million. With $1.2 million per year you give to the university, you can lease a lot of space and they have to take care of it for you. So we don't get into a situation like Reggie's where students don't know what in the world they're doing to actually look at real estate properly, renovate it, take care of it, and then you're dealing with a $250,000 renovation project. So once again, this is why finance can really come into handy when you're dealing with these large sizes of funds. You need to know the different aspects of finance and how you can use it to your advantage. You need to know the markets, you need to understand what's going on. The university, if not, can push you around, which has been the case. I mean, we saw before. They tried to get us to sign a contract that really was not okay for us. So the advantage is I've been looking at this for a long time. I have a lot of solutions, and I think we can actually renovate a lot more space than you think with $600,000 a year. But once again, we need to get through a couple things. Thank you.
Okay, public questions. Let's go again from the back. Trevor. One thing first, though, we're going to start with community matters this time. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a question for everyone. If you had control of the CSU tomorrow, and you were really bent on reducing the carbon footprint and the waste output of Concordia, what are the short-term and long-term policies that you would implement if you could?
What are the short and long-term policies to implement reducing the carbon footprint?
Carbon footprint and the waste output of Concordia University.
All right.
Can I ask a clarification?
Sure.
You're talking about just the CSU or all of Concordia?
Well, all of Concordia.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, community matters, you guys are first, then we're going to Chuck.
Okay, so yeah, I'll answer this question, and I think there's a few initiatives that we're already working on to try to reduce the carbon footprint of the university. Personally, I work with Divest Concordia, and we're trying to have the university adopt a responsible investment policy that excludes fossil fuels. Fossil fuels because they're the leading contributor to global warming, and we have to eventually transition away, and to lower our carbon footprint, it will be important to get rid of these fossil fuel investments. Secondly, I mentioned before that we want to get more sustainable food on campus. And 50% local is something that is doable, and the government is going to try to support public institutions to do this. So really trying to get Concordia covered by this will be very important. And then the leading contributor to greenhouse gas emissions in Quebec is transportation. And to look at the transportation habits of students and to try to create incentives to increase public transportation. But not only that, but also bicycling to school will be really important. There is a campaign going on right now across Montreal to have students over the age of 25 be covered by the student bus pass fee, which is extremely expensive. I live on the South Shore and pay $125 a month to come to Concordia University for the bus, and to have it to be less expensive to incentivize students to be able to take the bus will be something that's really important. So those, I think, are three things that are pretty solid for really reducing the emissions of Quebec in general, and to try to really work with other campuses to implement the same type of campaigns and to collaborate all together to do this across Quebec, and I think that's possible. The networks already exist to do that.
Thank you very much. Chuck?
So just in terms of the way that I approach sustainability, I like to look at it more as a sort of all-encompassing and all-inclusive thing, right? So it's not just necessarily about carbon footprint, it's also about the ability that we have to compost and all of this stuff, right? But speaking specifically to your point about carbon reduction, I'm going to assume you're talking about policy that the CSU would make for itself in terms of its own internal regulations. Is that what you mean?
No, I'm just thinking like if you had the power to implement something for Concordia.
So not necessarily policy, but just if we could do something, what would it be? I think Anthony's point about the student bus pass is actually like super on point, because it's not just about carbon footprint, it's about actually making life more accessible for students. In terms of reducing the carbon footprint of the Concordia community overall, I mean, there's so many things that can be done, but whether it's biking or essentially reducing people using cars, right? It's hard to get downtown. That's always going to be a problem. This whole divestment thing is really interesting because from my perspective as an engineer, we actually have a department of environmental engineering and some other things, but it's in there. And it's sort of, I think, in the university's best interest to promote its own students that it's training for these sustainable jobs. So that's actually a reason not necessarily to divest per se, but to invest in its own students and the sustainable initiatives for its own students over things that we don't train students for. We don't train them to go work in the oil sands, really, right? And so that's sort of the way that I would approach making these sorts of changes in the university, is that it's really about giving our students the chance to succeed in these sustainable jobs.
Thanks, Chuck. CS United.
All right, I'm a firm believer that the world right now is on a green wave, and this is the beginning of that. With all the initiatives that are coming out, greenhouses, that wasn't around 10 years ago. The push that we have now with the CFC, not just at Concordia, but everywhere in Canada and the States, is something that I think that Concordia should be a leader of. And I think that the best way to do that isn't for short-term or limited solutions applying only to Concordia. I think that the real people who are going to make the biggest impact on sustainability are going to be the students themselves. The students of Concordia are going to be the future leaders of the community, and if we can engage them and make them knowledgeable about the benefits of sustainability, that's how we're going to have the biggest impact. Concordia is going to be known as the school where the future of sustainability comes from, where you have groups like the GSG bringing David Suzuki to school. That's really cool. And I know a lot of people are very motivated by that, and that's going to push people to not only when they go into the business world and have to work, they're going to bring some of that knowledge with them to apply in their business and in their doings going forward. And I think that that's how Concordia can really have the biggest ecological footprint reduction with the resources that the CSU has to encourage student growth in terms of sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you. Here in CSU.
So I'd like to begin by echoing a few thoughts that Chuck made, because I think they're incredibly important. I'd like to begin by saying that I think it's somewhat of a misleading question to ask what is a single thing we can do, because I really feel that sustainability is an ideology and is a way of thinking as opposed to a single project. And I think if we actually go about it in a way that we try and adopt a single massive project, it's actually going to be more difficult for us to continue implementing. The second point I'd like to bring up is that there are already a huge number of incredibly well-connected, well-mobilized, and highly experienced groups on campus, the CFC and Divest Concordia, just to name a few. And they're already doing some of this incredible work. And I'm a real big believer in core competencies and this idea that you should try and find the people who are the most effective at a given task and give them the tools that they need to do that. So the way I see that happening is actually for the CSU to collaborate in a lot of different ways with the existing groups that we already have and allow them to do even more than they're already doing. The last thing I'd like to mention is that I think one of the really most organic ways we can create growth in sustainability at Concordia is actually by turning it into more of an academic issue. So what I'd really like to look at is whether or not we can include experiential learning in our academic courses or receive some degree of course credits / projects / collaborations so that you can actually apply some of the things that you're learning in different classes and use them to improve the Concordia community and actually receive academic credit for it in a way that will actually promote the individual student and excite them to actually go out and try and take up these projects firsthand.
Thank you, Experience CSU. Questions from the public. I'm going to make something clear here. There's a whole bunch of people that are current counselors or candidates that also want to be heard. So at 5:05, we're going to start hearing questions from them to give them the opportunity. Okay, but in the interim, we're still sticking with public. Let's go for the front this time. Blue flannel.
So in your openings, you all seem to have addressed an issue at the school, which is the
kind of division between different faculties and different places in the Concordia campus and community. So my question is, in what specific ways will you be facilitating engagement between facilities and different areas of campus? In your answers, I want specifics beyond just what faculties your members come from. How will you get isolated places like the JMSB and Loyola campus to be more included and involved? And how can we move past the divisive attitudes between these groups?
Okay, so if I get this, the question is, how do you plan on increasing connectivity across faculties and facilities?
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to start this time with Chuck.
What a big question. So all the time, it always starts with communication. And once you start opening the lines of communication between various groups, problems just sort of tend to come up and then get resolved. And that's certainly been my experiences here in the past year and before, that when you start being receptive and you start listening and you start sort of being a part of each other's community, that's when you actually get to sort of break down those walls, right, so to speak. And that's something that's very important to me as a candidate, is having those relationships with the different constituencies, because there needs to be that line of communication. It's always the precursor to effective collaboration. I've seen that in every single instance here. Loyola is definitely a hard nut to crack. It's sort of a shame that we can't seem to integrate them more into the culture of the CSU. And I actually ran for the executive before, and what convinced me to run that time was the then VP Loyola just talking about sort of the plight of the Loyola students, right? Like, that stuff sucks, and we need to start taking Loyola as a community very seriously, as being a part of our own, you know? We're not downtown in Loyola, we're Concordia, and we're the Concordia Student Union, right? It includes all of us. So it's sort of a shift in mentality that I think will really bring about that change more than any particular like policy or specific plan. And that's how we can only really move forward as an institution, at least in my opinion.
Thank you. CS United, you ready? Okay.
Oops, sorry. I'm a firm believer that the CSU is an umbrella organization for all the different faculties, but I don't think that the CSU should be the focal point and the mediator between the faculties. I think there's a lot of disconnect between the faculties because they don't communicate with each other. There's a lot of sustainable groups, there's a lot of different groups from different faculties that do similar things with similar objectives, but they don't work together. I know that there's a lot of groups that if they use their communal resources on communal projects, not only would you strengthen the bond between the different faculties, but students would be allowed to network within different faculties, not just through conferences, but also through events and on-hand experience in domains and fields that they hadn't tried before. And I think that the CSU is in a position to help organizations and the faculties do that. In charge of mobilization as the external, I know that I would love to have a push to make sure that students know that your student life isn't just in one faculty. I know that JMSB is very closed, they're very introverted, and I know that they have a lot of expertise and a lot of talent that can be used not only by JMSB but also by all of the other faculties and groups in terms of all their projects. We're talking about how some organizations didn't have a finance for the referendums. I'm sure that if cooperation had existed previously with JMSB, that's something that could have been done and could have achieved much greater success in terms of benefiting students, in terms of how much information is available. Projects like the ones that the CFC has are very hard. They're a lot of work. It's not easy. It's not people coming up and saying, I have a great idea, let's do it. It's a lot of work, and the more people that you have on that and the more cooperation that you have between groups, I think that's really what's going to be able to benefit Concordia as a whole.
Thank you, CS United. We're going all the way down the table. Experience CSU.
Thank you. So there was a really important issue that was brought up, and it's the disconnect between faculties. And as a JMSB student, I can kind of speak on behalf of, actually we're 4 JMSB students on our team and 4 arts and science. And that disconnect only exist because we haven't really accepted the fact that we are all really different. So our team sat down together and we realized, you know what, it would be really cool to make Concordia one big happy family. But to do that, we have to kind of accept that we are all really different. And in order to actually, you know, reunite and excite all of the faculties together, there are specific things that we can do by actually accepting our differences. So Cameron's actually going to talk about a few of those ideas.
So to address your question as specifically as I possibly can, a few actual initiatives we would like to do basically revolve around allowing each faculty to do what it does really, really well for other students. So some actual examples of that would be, one, I think we should go to the art students and we should allow them to showcase their art in some of the student spaces and allow them to actually sell it. So you know, you go into cafes sometimes and there's like a little price tag underneath it, so you could potentially buy it. So it makes the student space better and it's interesting for the actual artist and they might actually make some money off it. Another idea, we have music students at Concordia. Whoa, that's cool. So wouldn't it be neat if the Concordia Student Union had a theme song or something? Or maybe we could actually reach out to them and say, okay, what type of projects are they really good at? We also talk a ton about space, right? And so it looks like there most likely will be new space coming in the years to come for students. Wouldn't it be great if we could consult some of the students studying architecture and urban planning and different space concepts and come up with designs in almost a case competition type of style where we could actually ask them what they're really good at, allow them to make a plan, and then implement it. So in short, we want to take the things that students are really, really good at and give them projects to specifically work on.
Thank you. Community Matters.
Yeah, that sounds like actually a really great idea. I actually disagree though on the point that JMSB is the most disconnected or one of the most. I think that fine arts hasn't even been able to participate in the union in a full sense for the last 2 years, and I think that is a really strong indicator of kind of being separated from student life. And of course that's why there's the clubs funding, that I'd like to open up clubs funding more for fine arts clubs, because that's one way to kind of bring them in. But anyways, the CSU that I would be, and our team would be promoting, is more of a facilitator CSU, and it's kind of reducing the ego and allowing other groups to make use of our resources in a way that will benefit the maximum number of students, hence tapping into the leadership that already exists. But I mean, the food policy allowing student groups to apply for funding through the Student Center Fund for food projects is one of those. But keeping open communication during disagreements is going to be obviously really important as well. But I'm going to pass it over to my academic here.
Hello, my name is Terry. I haven't spoken yet. I'm running for Vice President Academic and Advocacy. I think that was a really important question that you asked. I've actually taken some tangible steps this year to facilitate and bring together all the different faculties at Concordia. I spearheaded, along with Jean over there and Melissa Kate, who was here earlier, the first ever Concordia Student Congress. The purpose of the Congress was to bring together departments from every single faculty to come together and speak unitedly on concrete concerns that affect the entire student body. I'm very proud to say that it was a very successful event. Every faculty did attend, and many positions were taken that I plan on using as a reference point throughout my entire mandate. I'd like to stress the importance that when you're dealing with university administrators, especially senior administrators, the only thing we have is our numbers. So there's 35,000 of us, and we spoke unitedly to speak on issues such as university governance. Sorry, I only have 10 seconds, so I'm going to go through them.
1 second.
Cooperative education, student space, budgetary cuts, intellectual property.
We're done.
I plan on working on all of those things.
Sorry, we're done. Hey, Terry, we're going to follow the rules here.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Okay, one more question from the public, and then we're going to accept questions from current councillors or candidates. Green Code.
Hey, I just want to ask directly, there's a referendum question that's about the levy groups, and I'm wondering what your positions are on that referendum specifically, that referendum question.
It's a good last question. So what is your opinion of the per faculty fee levy referendum question? We are going to start with CS United.
Well, with the fee levies, we completely support them because we find that it's a very valuable resource to a lot of students here at Concordia, especially to those that actually use it frequently. And what we what we want to do, no matter what happens to the votes, whether it's a yes or a no, is we're going to work with them, and we're going to promote visibility on campus so that students know and understand what kind of resources are here to help them, to aid them in every single area of their student life and experience. Because there's a lot of fee levy groups here that students don't necessarily know about or understand or are aware of, because they just don't know what kind of services they provide. So what we want to do, like I said, no matter what happens to the vote, is promote visibility and show these students that these resources are available to them.
1 minute.
Oh, that's
Okay.
Well, actually, we'll continue.
To be a lot more direct, our opinion is that we do oppose the per faculty referendum question. Actually, my colleague Mathieu there is actually sporting the I Love the Fee Levy groups.
It's a nice purple.
And because it is up to every single one of us as Concordia students to fund these fee levies. However, there's a nuance to that we want to add. It should be up to an individual to be in a fee levy or not on a per faculty basis, because then the lines get blurred a lot more, like, oh, I'm JMSB, but I want to be a part of this, so now I have to go opt in instead of opt out. It starts getting harder. So we will make it easier for individuals to opt out, but on a per faculty basis, it should remain university-wide.
Okay, we're going all the way across.
Hi, thanks for the question. This is actually an issue that we've been asked more than anything else, and because of that, we actually wrote a press release that clearly lays out our statement. We've been trying to circulate it around. For those of you who haven't seen it, I'm just going to read the most important line to it. We say, we at Experience CSU would like to publicly announce that our team does not have an official stance on the fee levy question and chooses to remain neutral. And I'm going to clarify that a little bit. We really feel that this is an incredibly important question, but we also feel that if we adopt one position or another, either an affirmative or a negative stance on it, we're actually going to be alienating students regardless of which position we take, and we really feel uncomfortable with that. So our goal is really to listen to the students. We really believe in a CSU that spends more time listening to students than telling them what to do. So we really want to see the outcome of this vote, and either way, we're going to keep working with the fee levies to allow them to do the great work they do, and we're going to keep allowing individuals to express their right to opt out. Each one of us, of course, has a personal stance on it. I'm more than comfortable with saying that I'm going to be voting no on the fee levy group. But we feel that as a collective group, we are not advocating a particular stance. We're remaining neutral. Our overall opinion on the matter is worth exactly 8 votes. And so students shouldn't be asking us what we think as a team. I'll tell you what I think as an individual. I'm voting no on it, but I really want to hear what the rest of the university has to say on it more than me telling them what to do.
Thank you, Cameron. Community Matters.
Hi, this question is very close to my heart as somebody that's worked for fee levy groups over the last 5 years at Concordia, and that I've been volunteering for groups for the last 7 years. I think that I can honestly say too, first, that because I'm part of the No campaign, to the No committee campaign as well, that myself and all of my group members will be voting no on the per faculty question. Fee levy groups are really interesting examples in our community of great community organizations that have stemmed from a group of students who came together voluntarily and decided to dedicate their time towards a need that they saw on campus that was for all the students' benefits. Some of the fee levy groups have been around for 20 years. They are examples of community organizations here at Concordia that have great finances, have great organizational skills that can be shared to other groups of students who are starting up their own ideas. I think it's another way of connecting students inside the community as well, in the sense that there are lots of internship opportunities to learn how to be an organizer, or how to just work in community organizations at each of these fee levy groups. I'm going to let Ben finish off because
Yeah, we're definitely 100% against this question. We think it needs to be voted down, and we've been saying this since day one. There was a reason I was wearing a patch that we created ourselves that said we support the fee-levy groups, and then Community Matters. It's actually a big part of why we chose our name, Community Matters. But I think if ever there was a time for the CSU to take leadership on an issue, it's now. The fee-levy groups really represent student and youth power. We need to realize that our institutions, the CSU, ASFA, CASA, JMSB, these groups have purely represent everybody. So the way there are groups, and Queer Concordia is a great example of this, where they can appeal to the student population and say, hey, 2 cents per credit, we would like to carve out a space for ourselves where we can create activities and that sort of thing that best represent their group.
Thanks, Ben. Chuck, final word.
Yeah, so definitely the biggest problem with the way all of this went down is that there wasn't the sort of collaboration between the two sides of this issue to actually try to resolve it, right? There's not much information out there about, have JMSB students tried to talk to the fee levies to fix this issue? I don't know. Maybe you do, but I don't. And I started this off by sort of making a joke about, together we're united community experience. But it's actually true when it comes down to it, right? We need to actually be working together and collaborating if we want to achieve that goal. So this speaks to the part of my platform that's really personal to me, and as a president and a leader, you need to be facilitating that collaboration. And these kinds of things need to be happening. So, whatever anyone's stance is on the issue, we should be working to resolve those problems. And not just simply antagonizing each other, which is sort of what's happened because the result of the process, right? It was sort of done haphazardly, and when you do things like that, it creates a lot of tensions, and then tensions boil over into accusations, and all of that other stuff. So that's sort of the way I view all of this question, is that it's a lot more complicated than a yes or no, and that's where I stand at least.
Thank you very much. Okay, now for the many counselors that are sitting, you can now ask a question. Nikos, you would bother me for 5 days.
Thank you.
Ask a question.
Hello, folks. Nikos here, CSU counselor, Arts and Science. I address this question, of course, to all the candidates here. We speak of having a strong, united community. I agree wholeheartedly. As someone who had to go through the nightmare that is Concordia's bureaucracy to get an alcohol and food waiver for my association, SHAC, Students of History at Concordia, as its Vice President of Internal Affairs, what resort for one of our main and important academic and informational events, which is to tell everyone what they can do with their history degrees.
Question.
Yes. What resources will you appropriate to help ease the process out, and as well, what will you do to help clubs and associations that have little to no resources, including office space? I just think that area of student union policy merits more attention. Thank you.
Can you repeat the question succinctly?
Okay.
1 sentence.
What resources will you appropriate to help ease the process out, and as well, how will you help out clubs and associations with little to no resources and office space in which to help coordinate their operations?
Okay. We're clear?
Yep.
How are you going to help clubs' resources? Chuck.
Me? Cool. Okay, so unfortunately I had to zip through everything in my opening statement because it's not enough time to actually lay out your platform in a realistic manner. But as part of this CSU communications point that I have in my platform, it's actually helping students and groups navigate the CSU bureaucracy. I think you've really hit the nail on the head there. It's filled with friction, to put it nicely. And one of the ways that I see fixing that is actually communicating with potential applicants, or whatever you would call them, to be able to fully inform them on what they need to do. So one of the ways that you do that is by writing example documents, right? You have a one-pager, this is how you do what you're trying to do. And if it's applying for a bursary or a SPF, right, you have an example budget or whatever, and everything that you would need to know so you can get a reference of what you're actually trying to do. And that's actually something that I already did this year for the changes we did to the financial policy with regards to spending money. So that's something that I feel very strongly about. I would definitely make sure happens, and I've already done it myself. So I sort of know where it needs to go from here.
Okay, we're going to CS United.
As a past president of the Concordia Canadian Asian Society, I didn't realize that there were resources available for us as a club. And it wasn't until this semester where we were notified that the IEAC, the International Ethnic Association Council, actually governs 10 other ethnic associations, and we are a part of this, but we were never aware. Actually, the president before me didn't know, and the president before that didn't know either. So I just feel like there's just a lot of resources that have been lost throughout the years, or information that just wasn't passed down properly. And what we want to try to do is get representatives and executives from each of these organizations and associations, and just go through with them. Hey, this is what's available at Concordia. This is what you can do, and if you want to try to do this, this is how you can do it. And just keeping each other accountable and constantly communicating with these executives and different representatives. Because a lot of people are saying that they don't know how to do this, or they don't know what's available, or they don't know where to go to even find these resources or the information of it. So what we want to do is we want to, take a more personal approach with these things and sit down with other representatives, other executives, and say, hey, okay, so what is it that you guys want to achieve? What do you guys want to do? Okay, that's what you want to do? This is how we can do it. And provide a list of resources that they can access. And just through word of mouth, through that, other clubs and associations, when they start talking to other representatives, they can be like, oh yeah, we did this because we sat down with the VP clubs and he said that these resources are available to us. Maybe you guys can look into it. So just taking a more personal approach in terms of getting resources out to clubs.
Thank you, John. Okay, we're going all the way down.
So I completely empathize with this question. This year, I am the president of one of the committees over at JMSB, Cazacares, which I know I mentioned before. And this is something that we worked really hard on, just because I think any committee or club or anything on campus, we all have these issues. We all have to try and go through this university policy. And the truth is, you can't necessarily change university policy, just like that, but you can make it easier for all of these clubs. And that's our goal. So we actually put a few ideas together that I'm going to talk to you guys about. One of them being something that we actually implemented over at CAZA on a bit of a smaller scale and that we just want to expand on. And it's creating a pool of equipment that is available to all student committees and clubs on campus. So things like projectors, all those things that you might need to run an event that you would normally have to rent at a cost, we would be offering free of charge. This is something that has helped us so much over at CAZA and has really cut our costs. So that is definitely something we want to work on. Second of all, definitely something that I believe Chuck kind of mentioned, which is comprehensive documents that actually help clubs, just make things a little bit easier. So budget templates, how-tos, these things would really simplify all of their lives because you don't necessarily just walk into a club and know exactly what to do. And the CSU is there to make that easier for you. So working with the clubs and making sure that they know exactly what they have to do, that would be really important. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Community Matters, you have the final word.
As the president, I think I would actually specifically like to sit on the clubs committee and make use of my ex officio kind of position on there. And actually, I'd like to sit on all the committees really and do that. But I think it seems like clubs are always trying to have fundraisers. That seems to constantly be happening, and yet we have a surplus of funds at the end of the year in the club's budget. So I think that's something that I would specifically like to address because that money is collected for clubs. 101s are an obvious possibility, and trying to reduce the costs across the board I think is a great idea as well. I'm going to pass it over now though.
As somebody who has gone to the Dean of Students' office so many times that they actually know my face and name for food waivers and alcohol waivers, I can totally understand the frustration with that. As I said before in the introduction, it would be great to have like a one document on the CSU website that says exactly where you need to go with the processing times of each application. Also to sit down with Andrew Woodhall, the Dean of Students. I mean, he's like really excited about all student initiatives actually genuinely. And I think that if we talk to him about our frustrations of like the horrible bureaucracy, that maybe he could help us streamline the process, maybe working with the GM of the CSU in order to alleviate some of the processing time. Also, if you're going to serve any alcohol on campus at any time, then you need to have a certain certification that the dean of students administers. So maybe as the CSU, we could like host those workshops at least once a semester and have anybody that anticipates serving alcohol to come to those things, and everybody gets certified together. Ideas like this that we can all like talk about and hopefully organically solve.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we make ourselves available to all the clubs at the beginning of the year, especially to kind of hear their collective needs too, because we can't possibly know them all right now. But I think there will be a lot of consistencies, and so communication will be necessary to address those.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, we're going to do 2 more questions, which means we're actually going to extend the entire debate by a little bit because everybody still is going to get a 15-minute break. So this is the second last question. Lucy.
I'll make this short and sweet. In March 2015, which will be under the tenure of whichever executive team, it gets voted next week. The CSU will be going to court against the Canadian Federation of Students. As executive candidates or as individual candidates without a team, how will you prepare for this upcoming court case?
How will you prepare for the court date with CFS in March of 2015? We're going to start with Community Matters, and we're going to go the other way.
I have a good deal of information on this court case already, so I would definitely study more and study a lot of studying. I think definitely a lot of discussions with the lawyer, because this is a very sensitive case. I think first and foremost, though, it starts with respecting the referendum mandates that we get, because this court case is based on a referendum more or less, and not respecting a referendum. So I think that would be a great place to start.
I feel like that would be external and likely working on this particular portfolio, but I think it's very clear that Concordia students overwhelmingly voted to leave the CFS, and that we'd have to respect this mandate and try to get out of this organization, which is trying to receive funds from students at Concordia for representation that we did not get, so for funds that they would have hypothetically gotten if we were still members. Hopefully there's going to be a court case with McGill students in the Quebec Superior Court to have this whole thing annulled, and we don't have to actually go through this a bit of a bureaucratic nightmare that the CSU has been dealing with for years. And I would be working with Ben and people that have previously sat in the CSU to deal with this particular issue. But I think it's very clear that we have a mandate to leave this organization, and that we have to go through with this and use the resources at our disposal to fulfill this mandate.
Thank you very much. Experience CSU.
We are not part of the CFS. We de-affiliated. They're going to get that through their heads. The documents are ready. We are ready for court. The documents have been ready for a while. We will make sure that it is publicly known what has occurred and the injustice that has occurred to us. We will mobilize the school, and I'm not just talking about the people that normally mobilize. I'm talking about we will mobilize every faculty of this school to make sure that they are aware we are not part of the CFS, and we will not allow this to occur. Pretty simple. Thank you.
Thank you. CS United.
I think that preparing for the court date is very important. It's going to be something that we're going to be working on from the very first day that we're in office until the very last day that we're in office. And it's going to be basically the biggest ongoing project in terms of resources towards the March of 2015. I do, however, believe that everything that has related to law should be left in those very capable hands of lawyers. I do believe that the CSU should be prepared to offer any documentation and to provide the backing of the students and prove that the students actually meant their referendum. I think the sentiment from everyone at these tables and everyone in this room is that we are not part of the CFS, and we don't want to be part of the CFS, and we don't want to give them money. It's not money that they've earned, and it's not money that they deserve. I think Concordia students can do way better than that. And I think that's shown across the board, not only at Concordia, but also with all the other schools who are going through the same process. And I believe that it's important to try to reach out to them and try to coordinate with them based on the injustices that have occurred from the CFS to the Concordia students. And I believe that mobilizing not only the school, but also every other student organization, so the graduates, you have McGill, you have all the other 13 schools that have decided to leave the CFS, and move them all into one global push back on the CFS to make sure that it's no more, that it's not as useful, and it's not serving a purpose to anyone here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chuck, final word.
The CFS is great insofar as it's so easy to hate. Like, we can all agree collectively that we are not a part of the CFS and they suck. So, I mean, like, Scott's actually 100% right. The court case has been, like, in preparation for a long time. So a lot of these documents and sort of, like, the dossier of this particular thing is already prepared. And mobilization will certainly play a part. But like I said, it's pretty clear, right? We're not part of the CFS. So that's it.
Thank you, Chuck. Okay, this is going to be the last question. All right. Wow. Feel really important. We already did the back. I think we're going to go for Gene, the current executive.
So I have a question for each candidate individually. In 30 seconds, what was your single greatest contribution to the Concordia community over the past year?
In 30 seconds, what was your single greatest contribution to the community over the past year? Okay, so we're going to just go from the right to the left. Each candidate's going to answer this one.
Hello, my name is Charles Eric Kirihara-san. First of all, I'm a new student as well, and I actually came from another university in the States. I involved myself over there, and now I want to be part of Concordia. I've seen that Concordia seem a bit separated. So as VP Student Life, I want to help everyone be unified in orientation, etc. And basically that's it.
Okay.
All right. Over the last year, I focused a lot of my efforts as president of Tau Kappa Epsilon fraternity on campus. Tau Kappa Epsilon is the largest fraternity in the world, and it's also an organization based on creating better men for a better world. My year has been promoting this fraternity and creating members of the community who are beneficial. I've increased funding, I've increased our resources, and I've also increased the quality of our membership. And actually, a lot of our members are actually here in this room. So.
Thank you. We're going to be really harsh and cut you off right at 30 seconds. Sorry for your phone. Go.
Okay, so what I've actually been doing over the past year or two was joining several different clubs and organizations, and one problem that I found with each of these is that their membership was kind of weak and their dynamics weren't as strong as they used to. So what I've been working towards is bringing people together and unifying them and helping them build a stronger sense of belongingness, a stronger sense of community and unity, and just having them find other peoples that are like-minded.
Thank you. I recommend you look at your clock. Ready?
All right. Over the past year, I have been mandated by the residents at Grey Nuns to be the president of the Residents' Council. And as president of the Residents' Council, I oversaw a budget and did many activities and events that would benefit residents' life.
Thank you. That was good. That was 20.
I would have to say, of the things that I've done this year, it would probably be either the Newtown report laying out really important financial changes for the CSU, or the motion regarding disrespectful behavior in the ECA. One of the two.
Okay, yeah, I guess my proudest accomplishment in the last year is working with people at Divest Concordia to really raise awareness about climate change, and also to have the university establish a working group on responsible investing, which I sit on. The university manages over $700 million in funds with their pension plan and endowment, and we're trying to get them to adopt socially responsible investing practices, which can have a tremendous effect on those in business.
Thank you.
I guess I could speak to the students I've represented at the Advocacy Center, defending their rights on campus. I've also articulated the voice of students on bodies such as the Senate or Arts and Science Faculty Council. But I guess my single claim to fame is going to be the Concordia Student Congress. I'm really proud of what I've done there. I plan on holding 2 sessions next year, one for each semester. So you're going to see a lot more of me, hopefully, if elected, and I'm going to be harassing you to come to the Congress because I think I can make the academic position cool. Thank you.
Don't harass people.
In the last, I don't have any claims to fame. In the last year, I've just been working hard to keep my head down in my Phi Levy group involvement. So I was just finishing up as a collective member at the People's Potato. I, with Jackie Martin from the Concordia Greenhouse, developed a project of local garlic planting. We planted 2,500 heads on a 2,000 square foot plot outside of Loyola so that the People's Potato will have local organic garlic every year, all year from now on. It's a self-sustaining project. Now I'm involved with the rooftop garden project with Satoshi Ikeda that's sponsored by Greenhouse. Okay, goodbye.
Building student leadership, I think, is my largest claim to fame this year. I mean, this culminated in the co-founding of the Concordia Food Coalition, which has had an influx of organizers that seem to be developing very well through our process there. I guess it further culminated through Concordia Transitions, which was organized by 4 volunteers and myself. And then these volunteers actually coordinated a group of 30 volunteers, more or less. And then I guess that's it. I'm out of time. I could go on for a while.
Ben.
So we are called Student CSU for reasons because we have a lot of experience in helping out in the Concordia community on all the campuses. I was VP External this year for Casa Cares, which is the John Wilson charity wing. So far we've planned up to about 15 events just this year. And we've by being VP External, I'm in charge of sponsorship, and we've raised over almost $40,000 just this year for the outside community for Concordia.
Thank you.
So my single greatest contribution to Concordia is that I have mobilized students and actually made students participate in student government. So I'm at a really quick list. There are 3 co-presidents, 2 presidents, 2 VP finances, 3 ASFA counselors, 1 CSU counselor, 1 VP social, 1 ASFA executive, and 1 undergraduate student representative of the Psychology Faculty Association that are in student governance and student politics directly because of me, because I talked them into doing it.
Thank you, Cameron.
Okay, so Sabrina kind of touched on it. With Casa Cares, we raised almost $40,000 for charity. But the greatest accomplishment this year, the fashion show that we have coming up next year, it's benefiting the Montreal Children's Hospital Foundation. So you want to talk about Concordia communities. 30 models from this school, they're all from different faculties, came together. They've already raised $10,000 of their own free will just to give back to the community. So that's pretty cool.
Thank you.
So exactly 1 year ago, I was leading a team as a president, and we were actually titled the top community project across all universities in Quebec. We raised hundreds of thousands of dollars in economic prosperity for entrepreneurs around. We raised $15,000, which is now being reinvested to build a greenhouse actually within the community, and hopefully 3 more by the end of next year. We basically modeled a grocery store, which we're hoping to eventually get going. So, and this year we've rehauled the entire financials of the CSU, $107,000 of tax paid back. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Michael Abbott. He's an independent candidate for VP Sustainability. Unfortunately, he had a prior engagement, so he's going to say one quick 30-second synopsis of what he did last year.
Okay, so in the last year, I actually haven't been at Concordia a whole lot. I was out west in the fall living in a van. But this last semester, every Monday, I've been mobilizing students through helping them repair their bicycles, which is an amazing manner of traversing the city since it's an urban place and we can all use bikes throughout the winter. So that's what I've done to help my Concordia fellow students. That and being super engaged with whoever wants to talk with me. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, guys, that's it for the executive debates. Thank you all very much for coming, but most importantly, we should give a round of applause to these guys at the front. Okay, we're going to have a 15-minute break, and then we're going to have a referendum committee debate that's going to last about 30 minutes.
Everybody ask more questions to us. We like answering questions.
so we're just going to do questions. I'm not going to give them a time limit.
Could we have an opening statement?
Yeah, each of you, and you can each try and make each other better than the person before you.
Nice.
I'll go first because mine's going to be the most underwhelming. I didn't sleep very much last night. But my name is Lucy. I am a member of this referendum committee. I'm implicated in a couple fee levy groups, but I'm also generally a supporter of all fee levy groups and the fee levy structure at Concordia. We've had a lot of supporters come to the fore and have written things in the papers and have talked in the hallways. So I'm almost afraid of, well, what any of us will be saying will be a little redundant. But it is worth saying that I think it's a good point that we argued that fee levy groups provide an extremely important part of Concordia's community. Concordia's community is not just academics, it's not just getting your degree. Concordia's community involves making opportunities, making links, like lines of support, and fee levy groups are the perfect example of this. These are student-supported groups that provide services for students, incredibly accountable, transparent financial statements. The AGM, which the annual general meeting attended by students, is the highest decision-making body for any fee levy group. Yeah, I'm just gonna stop that there for now because I'm sure someone else will be more articulate with these points.
Geneviève?
Hi, my name is Geneviève. I am the chair of the committee. I'm not very good at this whole thing, but I'm glad there isn't that much of a crowd. So I just wanted to point out, Lucy already said pretty much very good points, and I just wanted to point out, like said at the other debate, that there's a bunch of faculties in the Concordia community, and there are a lot of differences within them, and I don't think we should ignore them. I think we should embrace them, and there's 17 different fee levy groups, so every student in each faculty can find a little niche within these fee levy groups that they can relate to or that they can use. For example, studying at the greenhouse for anybody who is a farm kid and is studying in the city is a great niche to help them. And that's about it.
Thank you, Geneviève.
So, I guess I'd just like to start off by saying, I've participated in a number of fee levy groups. I've profited from the fact that they're on campus in innumerable ways. But, I think the most important thing for me is that I literally would not be here now if it weren't for fee levy groups. Like, if I hadn't come to Montreal and had the experience of going to Cinema Politica, volunteering at the People's Potato, going up to the greenhouse, well before I was even considering returning to university. This is after I had finished a university degree by flunking out of a program. And when I decided to finally go back to university, I thought, where's a great place to go? And the first place that came to mind was Concordia University, because it has an incredible, incredible community. And a lot of that comes from these fee levy groups. They just provide such a foundational aspect of what is, from my point of view, one of the most vibrant communities on any university campus, through what, from my experience so far, seems to be an almost entirely unique system to support and fund independent, autonomous student and community organizations in a way that's accessible to every student on this campus, that's accountable directly to the members who are the most involved in these organizations, and that are decided on democratically by the student body as a whole. And I think one thing that's really important to make clear is that voting yes for this referendum question doesn't leave these groups unscathed. It's not going to just let the status quo continue. Oh, they're going to have a little less funding. They can continue with their mandates. Like, this fundamentally puts these organizations in a precarious situation that challenges their ability to fulfill the missions that were democratically given to them by the student body previously. These organizations serve every member of the undergraduate student body, and any decisions about whether they should be funded or not funded, any grievances that people have with them, should be dealt with either through their own governing structures of the annual General Assembly which are extremely accessible. Any undergraduate student that feels disserviced by these organizations is able to go and have their voice heard, or by the entire undergraduate student body, because those are the people who will be affected by the decisions made in referendums. We can say that, oh, it's fine for one faculty to just opt out of the organization, but that you're either removing access in many cases to services that are aimed at some of the most marginalized portions of the university community from a faculty, or you're forcing these organizations to accept the cost of providing services across the university body. And in a lot of cases, you're removing such a significant portion of funding that they might not even be able to continue servicing the remainder of the faculties. I really think that this is a question that is foundational for what makes Concordia what it is today. And it's hard for me to imagine a more dangerous direction to be taking not only our relationship to fee levy groups, but the entire Concordia Student Union, to fracture up our membership into per faculty bases. Frankly, for me, it's the first step towards the dissolution of what we have here at the CSU right now, which brings together all of these undergraduate students from so many different places. And just accepting that eventually it will wither away and the faculties will silo off and become their own walled gardens where students rarely interact. It's the exact opposite direction of where I think we need to be going.
Gene, you can go on forever. I'm going to have to cap you. Right. Questions for the S committee? No committee, whatever. Go ahead. Well, where's the S committee?
Yeah, no, I'm just to play devil's advocate because I do support the fee levy groups. But I guess my question is, what I have in my head is that kind of like state versus federal relationship. Like, would it be so bad if we just kind of had like mini people's potatoes per faculty or something, where you have? I mean, would that be something that you would see as a counterpoint to what you're saying at all, or would that be harmful, or?
Yeah, I mean, I can use a specific example, the people's potato. But generally, all fee levy groups do really miraculous things with what ultimately are very limited resources. And even though every student does contribute, these resources, you know, they aren't huge. Like, every single cent has to count. So something like the people's potato, which can operate to serve such a wide section of the student body with what they have, that's only possible with the fees collected from the entire student body. If you do it per faculty, like if you have many people's potatoes, you will have organizations that don't have the same capacity to give such great service. I mean, it really does, in this case, come down to resources available, and for so many of these things, you really do have to have a wide base of support. You can't have a people's potato that gets a quarter of the funding. You can't have a functional award-winning radio station that has a quarter of the funding. You can't have a television station that gets a quarter of the funding of what it has. So it's completely unfeasible from just from a money sense, just from a resource sense, just from a volunteer power sense.
I think that it's got to be touched on from a much more like concrete business point of view as well, right? I mean, you're serving the same population, but you're quadrupling your static costs, right? You need 4 kitchens, 4 fridges, 4 groups of people who are permanent staff, who are being funded, all fulfilling the same mandate. And then this whole issue of per faculty questions really, even though they're kind of tangentially included in the question, really ignores independent students who are not located in a single faculty. And I guess the CSU could run questions on their behalf, but they're pretty hard to find at the best of times. And so it's like, oh, we have a people's potato for independent students? Where do we put that? How do they know about it? How do they get to it? It's just a basic information problem that can't really be solved. You know, it's just, are we Concordia, or are we 4 universities that all have their own separate student bodies, all have their own separate structures, all have their own separate services? I think that's the question we're being asked.
Just to ask the question. Yeah, of course.
I think a lot of people have understood this question wrong. Is it, as I would not change any of the fee levies that are currently operating right now. Where this question fundamentally stemmed from is the CFC referendum fee levy that is branched off. Is that a lot of students felt that because 500 students from pretty much one faculty voted yes for that, that it was applied to all students at Concordia. And that's something that we say is democratic, but it really isn't. And I understand that the fee levy groups right now that operate for all Concordia, I would not touch them. This is not what I understand from this referendum question. It's just that if there is new fee levy groups, if there is, say, 2 faculties that are like, we don't understand what they're trying to achieve, instead of trying to work with faculties that don't understand, it's just like, oh, well, let's get people that vote yes and get them to vote majoritively yes over the other ones. So that's just the one question where I feel like we're all democratic about this, but there's a big point that's like, hey, come on, there is people that are not happy about this, and let's just please not brush them off.
So I think first of all, we don't know who voted from which faculty in favor or against of any given fee levy. It's a referendum question that's posed without any reference to faculty numbers, and we literally cannot know who or which faculty voted in favor or against. It's just a fact. The second thing is that this question, as it's posed, absolutely and 100% opens the door to the strategic faculty-wide defunding of organizations. I mean, you can't ask for better evidence than the second petition, which was provided at the same time, whose intention was to ask only JMSB students whether they wanted to defund these organizations or not.
Which we also shot down.
It was revoked by the Judicial Board. It was not shot down in any meaningful way. It's very much what we can expect to happen should this first fee levy question occur. You can be guaranteed that this second petition will return next year, better written, but exclusively for JMSB students to make a decision about whether they want to remove access to members of their faculty to very important services that many of them are using. I mean, the last thing about democracy has losers, and those losers are almost never happy. But that's part of the democratic game, is that you accept that sometimes you don't get your way, sometimes you do, but that's the system we operate under. If people aren't happy with a fee levy that has already been passed, organize a campaign on a university-wide level which clearly demonstrates why this organization is not fulfilling its mandate. Demonstrate that that's the case. Bring people with you. Mobilization is the only solution to democratic gaps.
Just to add on to that as well, I mean, to bring back the AGM, since the Concordia Food Coalition, as a student-wide referendum question, had been voted in favor, if it exists as a fee levy group, they will have AGMs. Every single student at the university can attend those AGMs and influence the way that organization works. So, I mean, just going beyond, the option of if there's a fee levy group that you don't think deserves the status, get the entire university behind you, but you can also express your own grievances as members, because if you are a Concordia student, those groups are accountable to you, so you can go to those AGMs. You can air your opinions. You can try and make that change. But, as Jean said, democracy is a tricky thing, but there are avenues. There are democratic avenues, no matter if a vote is passed or not.
I mean, just to give some perspective, one of the most well-attended AGMs of fee levy groups probably still only has, 100, 150 students that will attend it on the best of times. If you have an entire faculty of people who feel aggrieved by an organization, I'm convinced that, if you can't get 30, 40, or 50 of them to get into a room and form a voting bloc, then they're not actually that unhappy. Like, it's 3 hours out of an afternoon, 1 day a year. It's an extremely accessible method for having grievances addressed. The AGMs are not that highly populated. You can get a relatively smallish group of people who actually give a crap, and they can show up and really, really push the discourse that's occurring at that fee levy group. And that to me is a much, much more substantial show of dissatisfaction than signatures on a petition to put a referendum question.
I would like to ask a question. So, do you think that there is this sort of problem, shall we say, between fee levies and some student groups? And if so, how do you think those sorts of issues can be resolved? There are apparently grievances. Do you think those grievances are legitimate? And if you do think they are legitimate, how would you go about solving those sorts of grievances in terms of collaboratively sort of fixing issues that may? I don't know if you want to speculate on that, but I'd be sort of interested.
Do you have an example to springboard off of?
I don't know if we could speculate on the grievances, their existence, or the legitimacy. I personally don't have a lot of grievances against fee levy groups, so I can't speak on behalf of those who do. If those who do have grievances want to air those grievances publicly and specifically, then we can address those. But when it comes to the more abstract question of if a group has grievances, how do they go about resolving those? I've really seen two schools of thought on it, I guess. One school, which is the one that I advocate for, is let's get mobilized, let's try and get some people, a collective action going. Let's go to that group and try to bring them to where we want them to be. That, is what I view as a great way to try and resolve these types of grievances. Other people view a situation in which they want to say, no, we want to be able to strategically remove funding from groups that we feel are not meeting our needs, and then by doing so, send a political message which says, I need you to come to me and you have to find out what my needs are and then start meeting them. I'm not personally a proponent of that method. I think it's a little bit circular. I think it's indirect, and I think that it's much simpler to simply go forward to the group itself and say, we have articulated concerns. Not we have vague concerns and you need to suss out what they are and then figure out how to solve them for us. And that's really, the second option is really what I see represented by something like the second petition which was thrown out. It was sort of an attempt to send a political message, which admittedly I think it succeeded in doing. The organization that's happening right now in fee levy groups, I think it really did demonstrate to them, holy crap, we should be doing a lot more in terms of outreach and in terms of promoting ourselves. And that's good. They should be promoting themselves more. They do fantastic things. Yeah.
Speaking as someone from a fee levy group, recently had to go through some restructuring and trying to adhere to governance and stuff. Just so you guys understand, there hasn't been yet to have any kind of training or any kind of support with regards to how a fee levy group or a not-for-profit board of directors should operate. So I'm just curious, is there any importance placed by the CSU on providing support for these sort of methods of governance? Because I understand that that's sort of what the flag does. They make sure that all these groups have their constitution, have their financial reports and stuff like that. But to be honest, I wish there was more pressure for that stuff. In our community, we're a community of video makers. We don't care too much about politics, to be honest. We're not here writing policies and stuff like that. The finances side too, it's not that much of an allure. So we're lucky to have someone such as Julian Ward, a journalist, who took it upon himself to learn everything he could about establishing finances at a not-for-profit, and took the time out of this summer to help with that sort of thing. If we didn't have an individual like that, we might still be way, way further behind than we are today. And so I'm just wondering, is there any kind of resource currently, or could there be a resource in the future?
I mean, these are structural issues that not really tangibly touch on to the fee levy question in question. However, they are important in terms of this entire discussion. I do think it's significant that every single platform of candidates running for the executive this year have said in one way or another that they want to support fee levy groups, that they want to help facilitate not only keeping them accountable for some, depending on which slate we're talking about, but also helping to promote fee levy groups. So, I mean, I'm only speaking as an individual, and an individual who is implicated in a couple of fee levy groups. I would welcome that, but we do have to have a conversation of how that manifests. And I think if we're talking about CSU involvement in helping fee levy groups, they need to talk to fee levy groups. I think maybe there's much that we can go off of what we think they need, but there needs to be communication, because you're articulating CUTV has had to go through restructuring. It'd be great to have these resources. Articulate those resources and articulate those needs again, I'm a little tired. And don't assume that they will go for it. Hopefully this question has put the fee levy issue on the minds of every single person running for executive. But I really do hope that the answer is to listen to what fee levy groups need and to not assume what they need.
I just want to point out too that, I mean, the CSU isn't necessarily the answer to these needs either. You know, I've spoken, for example, with board members on the Link Publication Society, and they, members of their board have articulated to me very clearly that even if the CSU were to provide resources, they would most likely not take advantage of any of them because they cannot risk having any links organizationally to one of the largest news items that they are constantly reporting on. You know, they don't want the CSU's support because they need that independence to retain their legitimacy. But I do think that this question of resources for groups is something that's not only faced by fee levy groups either. This is a very serious issue faced by student and community groups throughout Concordia, but also throughout the city in a lot of different avenues as well. I mean, we're here focused on the Concordia community. From my own point of view, as an individual who's not heavily implicated in any fee levy groups currently, I think that an organization like FLAC, the Fee Levy Advocacy Concordia group that already exists on campus, that has been a baseline of requirements for groups to adhere to it. You have to post your audited financial statements. You have to post the minutes from your AGM. You have to have your constitution online. You have to have a transparent, clear, simple opt-out mechanism available. This is a good place to start. And so for myself, I would think of, it might be a good idea for fee levy groups to better institutionalize something like FLAC to be able to collectivize the resources that they need to meet those requirements and to meet the requirements that are on them as independent companies, which comes with risks. You can't have an umbrella group holding your hand necessarily if you're going to be independent. But there are other avenues, I think, where people could start building collective community resources for themselves, for each other, that really meet those types of needs.
Do you think it should be made easier for the individual to opt out of these groups?
That's a whole big question. This is the individual opt-out procedure is something that many fee levy groups are in the process and have been in the process for a while of trying to simplify or to make more accessible. I know that there are some fee levy groups that openly make a Facebook event. This is your chance to opt out, and fee levy groups learn from each other as well. But the slippery slope in terms of talking about the individual opt-out procedure, in terms of this question, is that I guess maybe for the petitioners of the question that is now on the ballot, it expresses some kind of grievance, but by proposing the most destructive way possible of changing the way that opt-outs work. So this is a huge issue, and it's something that I am confident that fee levy groups will be talking about with more urgency over the summer. But in terms of this particular question, it's the complete wrong, destructive, destabilizing way of going about trying to bring up these reforms.
I think when we're talking about opt-outs as well, it's important to realize really what somebody's contribution to one of these organizations really means, And so we're talking about the ease of the opt-out. Right now, for example, if I were to go within 2 or 3 weeks of the DNE date to the Frigo Vert, pull up on their computer my, schedule, say, hey, these are the credits I'm taking, cut me my check, I walk out with it. It's not the worst. It would probably take me 5, 10, 15 minutes. And for most people, with organizations like these, it's not really worth their $2 or $3 or however much they're pumping into this organization. But on the other hand, that $2 or $3 is of enormous significance to the organization itself and probably to an actual human being's well-being somewhere on campus. So the issue with making opt-outs easier is if you make the opt-out $3 easy, if you could just go online and click a button and say, yeah, I'll opt out of this thing, you get $3, sweet, $3, took me 40 seconds. But at the same time, okay, I guess that's good for the person who has $3, but the organization could be suffering enormously under the weight of this type of thing. So I really think we need to balance in needs. You know, what is the need of the individual for this money that they're opting out of? And what is the need of the organization and the people who use these organizations, you know? Like, if you have 10 people opt out of the Center for Gender Advocacy, and because of that, one less person is able to get peer support, that to me is like, man, that one person's peer support is worth way more than those 10 people getting their $5 back. Like, I really think we need to talk about the work that these groups are doing. It's about a lot more than the minimal fee that we are putting into it. And I think that there has to be a level of effort required to opt out that really makes people consider what it is that they're opting out of and what the repercussions of that action are.
Yeah, there's
10 more minutes, then we're packing this up.
Can I just follow up very quickly? There is an extremely fine line between convenience and incredibly destructive consequences. And when we're talking about community organizations where the sum, you can argue, is so much greater than the parts put into it, convenience, if you follow that rhetoric too far, is completely destabilizing and destructive for these resources, for the same examples that Jean brought up. But yeah, no, going along the route of convenience as a priority can lead to some pretty bad places.
I guess to follow up, if no one else has any questions, do you think that in that same way it should be made maybe a little bit more difficult or something, or a different kind of work needs to be put in instead of just getting 500 signatures in order to get something up as a referendum question?
As it stands right now, a question to remove a fee levy doesn't really have a lot of framing in the CSU standing regulations. And I think that that's a huge issue that really needs to be managed. From a personal point of view, I'm treading a fine line here, from sort of a perspective of natural justice, the process by which you remove a fee levy should more or less match the process by which it's instated. It's just a sensical, that's just how policy tends to work. So when we're talking about 500 signatures, nobody else gets to look at it, it goes straight to ballot, that's not the process we use to institute fee levies. They're held up to a much, much, much higher standard and a vote of council to ever go to ballot. So I think we need to consider implementing sort of an isomorphic structure that mirrors that type of thing, so that we ensure that, you have to, again, balance accessibility with diligence, with care. And that's really the challenge of an organization like the CSU, is balancing those two sides of a coin. You know, we are gatekeepers to our membership, and we're very important gatekeepers. And that's a position that we could either use responsibly or abusively. And it's very important that we set ourselves up institutionally so that we're responsible in the way that we act as gatekeepers.
Thanks.
Chap?
Should the CSU be acting as that gatekeeper, or is there a better one? Like, is this more a problem of fee levies being subject to the CSU, or what?
From my point of view, as an accredited student association for the undergraduate student body and the sole legal representative on their behalf, I think that it is legitimate for the CSU to be the gatekeeper of that membership in referendums. I think that, the CSU is not subjecting fee levies to an enormous amount of oversight beyond that fact, but when it comes to asking our membership to make authoritative decisions in a self-determining way on their own behalf, I believe very strongly that the CSU needs to protect its position as the sole legitimate gatekeeper. To give a counterexample, I wouldn't necessarily want the university administration directly polling all Concordia undergraduate students in a referendum and then making authoritative decisions on their behalf. It directly disempowers the Concordia Student Union, which is meant to be their representative within this university and on campus. So I really do think that it's important for the CSU to maintain that role, but again, to maintain it in a responsible way.
Five more minutes, guys.
Welcome to stay afterward. Do you think that this is maybe a platform to start exploring different ways of collecting fee levy? Basically, if the idea is that either you opt out or you pay for it, is there maybe a different way? Because, I mean, I can understand that people feel disempowered by the fact that they are not really in control of where their money goes unless they opt out. Maybe giving them some sort of say in which fee levies without necessarily, it's hard to really explain it, but say if you have so much in fee levies that you would have to pay per year, maybe deciding where it goes might be an interesting way of kind of empowering someone and giving them the incentive to pay the fee levies rather.
I don't know, speaking for myself, but I think also speaking for a lot of the No committee and to an extent a lot of my colleagues outside of the committee, but in terms of people who work with fee levy groups day to day, that kind of thinking really goes close to the line of defining fee levy groups as per use services or as services that should only be funded by an individual if they feel that they're getting immediate use out of it. And I think the vision of fee levy groups is not that. I mean, having a kind of, it's almost like a consumer-based model when you're saying, I'm only going to pay into the things that I directly benefit from. And the way that, and the really special thing about fee levy groups is by getting everyone to support them, we're able to create resources that are there, maybe not necessarily for you, but as a member of your community, that $3 you put in means that that's there for someone else. I mean, I know this example's been made, but I mean, you know, we all pay into the athletics fee. Not all of us play sports, not all of us go to sports games, but that's great that that's there. In the same way, you know, not all of us will necessarily go to the potato, but because there's a wide base of funding, that service can exist. And I mean, there's a reason why the No campaign has taken up the slogan of support Concordia community. Because it really is that, it's community. It's not going into this very narrow view of I should only get something because I paid into it. It's we should all get something because we all support it.
And I mean, we have to remember too, like fee levy groups are not just, you know, we've been talking about a pretty small subset of them. You start talking about like the link. Should people just strategically defund the link? What would it mean if an entire faculty decided to stop paying the link's fee levy? And then what, they're not allowed to read the newspaper anymore? How do you stop them? Right? Like it gets into really confusing territory of like, what does it even mean to defund some of these organizations? If you defund the Concordia Food Coalition, and then they manage to get a new student-run food cafe opened in the building that you happen to frequent often, you still got the benefits of that. Does that mean you don't get to go there anymore? You're not a member of that organization? You're not like, a lot of these are non-excludable public benefits. And they really are about community empowerment a lot more than they are about individual empowerment in a lot of ways. And, you know, let's say the, you know, ENCS faculty decides to stop funding, I don't know, like CVAP, right? And just be like, oh, no engineers get to go to Hulu and help out on infrastructure projects. Like it's very bizarre.
I guess what I'm actually trying to say is, exploring a way to incentivize, I guess, paying fee levies, because clearly it seems like you know, either you want to shoulder your community or you think of it as paying for a service. So to incentivize that, to basically explore that venue would be what I'm trying to ask here. Do you see this as like a possibility, maybe a platform to explore that?
I'm not sure I totally get the question, but going off of my interpretation, I mean, how do we encourage this idea of community instead of paying per service?
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole idea is that basically either you're paying for a service that you're not using, or you're kind of paying for participation in a community, or being, you know, shouldering the community, shouldering a social service in a sense.
No, I think a disguised blessing of this entire question is that it's really started a conversation on campus about what fee levy groups look like. And I mean, it would be great if we didn't have to fight this question, because, you know, this is a question that the petitioners said themselves they didn't think through the consequences of. We have the consequences range from extremely confusing and unclear at best to totally destructive at worst. But because it's been brought to the fore, we can have these dialogues, and not only the undergraduate students represented here and the dozens and dozens from every faculty that are sitting on this committee, but also fee levy groups and staffers and board members and users. It's given a platform for us to talk about how special Concordia's community is and what goes into creating that community, because unless you say it, it might not be obvious. So it's the hidden blessing in this question, is that we're able to really explicitly say and have the platform to say, this is what's up, this is how we think community should look like, this is what a lot of people think community should look like, let's talk about it.
Cool.
Thanks for the Q&A. Great debate.
Hopefully they'll show up tomorrow.
I don't think I can even have a debate tomorrow.